They had no warning. One day, they were the rulers of a thriving kingdom, with towering temples, a rich culture, and centuries of wisdom. And just a few days later, they were nothing. Nameless bones scattered in burned-out villages. No epic battles. No famous last stands. No grand records in history books. Because Spain didn't just conquer them. Spain erased them. Most people have heard of the Inca, the Aztec, or even the Maya, but almost no one remembers the civilization that disappeared in just 1 week. Not because it was weak, but because it was too advanced, too threatening, and too inconvenient for Europe to allow it to exist. This is the true story of the genocide that was never supposed to be remembered. And it all began with gold. By the early 1500s, Spain had already begun carving its bloody path through the Americas. After conquering the mighty Aztec Empire, Spanish conquistadors believed they had seen the peak of native wealth. They were wrong. On the northern coast of what is now Colombia, a civilization thrived. One that built cities on stone terraces, mastered advanced metallurgy, and bathed their kings in gold dust. Literally. When the Spanish heard rumors of this golden kingdom, they gave it a name, El Dorado. But it wasn't a myth. It was real. And it belonged to a people known as the Tairona. The Tairona had lived in the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta Mountains for over 1,000 years. They were mountain people, astronomers, architects, priests, and warriors. Their cities were connected by paved roads, staircases, and aqueducts. They built temples that aligned with solstices. They created intricate jewelry, not just for decoration, but for spiritual rituals. They were a civilization of balance between nature, spirit, and community. And they were powerful. But what made them a target wasn't just their gold. It was their resistance. Unlike other native groups who had been overwhelmed by disease or internal collapse, the Tairona resisted the Spanish at every turn. They did not negotiate. They did not surrender. They fought, vanishing into the jungle and striking back with deadly precision. They knew the mountains better than anyone. They were ghosts in the fog, silent, deadly. For decades, the Spanish tried to subjugate them. For decades, they failed. But in 1600, something changed. A Spanish bishop named Lucas Fernandez de Piedrahita, along with Franciscan friars, began to describe the Tairona not just as pagans, but as heretics, as dangerously stubborn, obsessed with witchcraft, and hostile to God. Suddenly, this wasn't a war of conquest anymore. It was a holy war. And in 1609, the Spanish crown authorized a campaign not to defeat the Tairona, but to erase them. The mission began with a deceptive peace offering. Spanish priests invited the Tairona leaders to a feast, offering gifts, blessings, and friendship. Some elders, weary of war and hopeful for peace, accepted. They were never seen again. The Spanish then used the absence of leadership to move in swiftly. Their goal was not open battle, but decapitation of the society. Priests were hunted and executed. Sacred sites were defiled. Cities were torched. The jungle was filled with the smell of ash and iron. Within just 7 days, dozens of Tairona settlements, some with populations in the thousands, were reduced to rubble. Temples collapsed, oracles silenced, children taken, women enslaved, and the men? Most never lived long enough to see what happened to their world. The Spanish left no survivors. They didn't want prisoners. They wanted silence. By the end of the week, it was done. The cities, so hidden in the mountains, were abandoned. The people disappeared. And the records of the Tairona were deliberately destroyed or buried under religious justifications. The gold? Melted down into coins. The land? Claimed for plantations and Catholic missions. The name Tairona barely survived in the margins of colonial archives, often confused with other tribes. For centuries, their story was nothing more than a whisper, until a mistake changed everything. In 1976, a group of looters stumbled upon a stone path deep in the mountains. It led them to Ciudad Perdida, the lost city, one of the ancient capitals of the Tairona. What they found stunned archaeologists. Terraces, tombs, gold artifacts, road systems, a city as complex as any in pre-Columbian America, yet older than Machu Picchu. The truth came rushing back like a ghost breaking through a sealed door. The Tairona had not been primitive tribes. They had been a civilization, erased not by time but by design. But here's where the story takes an even darker turn. Because some of the descendants of the Tairona still live, hidden in the mountains, in small communities like the Kogi and Arhuaco. They speak little. They avoid outsiders. But they carry the memories of the genocide in stories passed down through generations. Stories about betrayal, blood, and the silence that followed. And they say one thing again and again. The world once tried to forget us, but now we are remembering ourselves. It's a haunting reminder that history is not just written by the victors. It is often edited by them. The erasure of the Tairona was not an accident of war. It was a decision, a choice to remove not just a people, but a worldview that challenged the very foundations of European colonialism. A worldview where gold was sacred, not currency. Where land was shared, not owned. Where nature was not conquered, but revered. And perhaps that was the real threat. Spain didn't just erase a civilization in a week. They erased an idea. And for centuries, the silence echoed louder than any truth. But now we hear it again. Whispers in the mountains, stone paths uncovered by time, and the voices of those who refuse to be forgotten. So the next time someone tells you that El Dorado was just a myth, ask them, what if the real myth was the idea that it never existed at all?